Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about working alone on a research station orbiting a gas giant is that you start having conversations with the coffee maker. Not out loud, mind you, because that would be crazy. Just, mentally. Appreciating its consistency, its reliability, the way it never judges you for brewing your sixth cup at what might technically be considered bedtime, if bedtime were a thing that mattered when your nearest human neighbor was approximately 9 million kilometers away. Lyra had been on Outpost Meridian for 3 months, 2 weeks, and, she glanced at her chrono, 4 days. Not that she was counting. Counting would imply she cared, and she'd stopped caring around the 6-week mark, right about when she'd started naming the dust particles that floated past her workspace. Gerald was her favorite. Gerald had ambition. Gerald always drifted upward. The station hummed around her, that constant low-frequency drone that had become more familiar than silence. She was cataloging tissue samples from the planet below, a massive jungle world called Arcturus C6 that was home to approximately 9,000 species of things that wanted to eat each other. The food chain down there was less of a chain and more of a really aggressive circle. Everything ate everything. It was like nature had looked at the concept of an ecosystem and said, yeah, but what if everyone was constantly furious? The dominant predator species were called Grawl, which sounded like something a marketing team had come up with after running growl through a random letter generator. They were 6-legged, fur-covered, and built like someone had taken a bear and a panther, put them in a particle accelerator, and collected whatever came out the other side. The survey teams had classified them as non-sentient apex predators, with the intelligence roughly equivalent to a particularly clever dog. Maybe a crow. Definitely not people. Lyra pipetted another sample onto a slide, her movements automatic after months of the same routine. Catalog, scan, log, repeat. Catalog, scan, log, repeat. This was what 15 years of xenobiology training got you. A front-row seat to the most boring show in the galaxy, now playing in the middle of absolutely nowhere, starring nobody but yourself. The scratching sound started around hour 6 of her shift. At first, she ignored it. The station was old, held together by duct tape, optimism, and whatever the spacefaring equivalent of thoughts and prayers might be. Things scratched, things hummed, things occasionally made sounds like a dying whale, which the maintenance AI assured her was normal operational variance. She'd learned to tune it out. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Okay, that was more persistent than usual. Probably the ventilation system again. Last month, a fan bearing had gone bad, and it had sounded like someone tap dancing in the walls. She'd fixed it herself, because calling for maintenance meant waiting 3 weeks for a supply drone, and she'd be damned if she was going to listen to tap-dancing walls for 3 weeks. She finished logging her current sample and stretched, her spine making a series of pops that probably weren't medically advisable for someone only 32 years old. The joys of long-term low gravity. She made a mental note to actually use the exercise equipment tomorrow. It was the same mental note she'd been making for 2 months. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was coming from the direction of the main airlock. That was weird. The main airlock opened onto space. Nothing should be scratching at it unless a meteorite had developed opinions about wanting to come inside. Lyra pulled up the external camera feed on her tablet. The station had 6 cameras covering all the approach vectors because, apparently, whoever designed research stations thought people would actually check them. She hadn't looked at the feeds in weeks. Why would she? Nothing ever happened. The first 3 cameras showed the usual view. the station's exterior, the curve of Arcturus sixth below, and the endless nothing of space doing its endless nothing thing. Camera 4, which covered the main airlock, showed something that made her brain stutter. There was a creature sitting on the docking platform. A small creature. A fuzzy creature. A creature with 6 legs and eyes the size of dinner plates that was, unless she was having a psychological break, deliberately pawing at the airlock door. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Lyra said to the empty lab. The coffee maker did not respond, maintaining its characteristic discretion. She zoomed in the camera. The creature was definitely a Grawl cub, probably 3 or 4 months old based on its size. Its fur was a mottled gray and cream color that would eventually darken to the deep charcoal of an adult. Its paws were comically oversized, like it hadn't quite grown into them yet, and it was, without question, intentionally interacting with the door. Scratch, 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 pause, scratch, scratch. The pattern was too regular to be random. The cub would scratch a few times, then stop and tilt its head, like it was waiting for something. Then it would try again, adjusting its approach slightly. It was trying to knock. A non-sentient animal. Trying to knock on a door. To request entry. Like it understood the concept of doors, and entry, and requesting. Lyra's scientific training, which had been mostly dormant for the past few months, suddenly woke up and started screaming. This wasn't possible. This wasn't in any of the survey data. Grawl didn't do this. They couldn't do this. They were smart, sure, but this was tool use. This was understanding human constructs. This was... The cub lost its balance and tumbled sideways off the platform, flailing all 6 legs in a way that would have been adorable if it wasn't happening in the vacuum of space. Except, wait, no. There was atmosphere on the platform. The station's external shield extended about 2 meters out, creating a small bubble of breathable air. It was meant for emergency repairs, not for housing clumsy alien cubs. The cub rolled, scrambled back upright, and immediately returned to the door. Scratch, scratch, scratch. "Okay," Lyra said slowly. "Okay, this is fine. This is a completely normal situation that definitely has a reasonable explanation." She pulled up the station logs, scanning through the automated reports. No breaches, no alerts, no indications of how a Grawl cub had gotten from the planet's surface to her airlock. The planet was 800 kilometers below. Grawl couldn't fly. They definitely couldn't survive atmospheric exit. So how? Oh, there it was. 3 days ago, an automated supply drone had made a delivery. Standard procedure: dock, unload, return to the surface depot. The depot was near the jungle edge, right in prime Grawl territory. The cub must have gotten into the cargo hold, hitched a ride up, and then... What? Waited around for 3 days before deciding to announce itself? She watched the camera feed. The cub had stopped scratching and was now pressed against the door, its large eyes staring directly at the camera. It chirped, a high-pitched sound that the external mic barely picked up. Lyra rubbed her face. She should report this. Protocol was crystal clear. No unauthorized biological contact, no deviation from approved research parameters, absolutely no adopting stray alien fauna, no matter how pathetic they looked. The cub chirped again. It raised one oversized paw and placed it against the door, not scratching this time, just resting it there, waiting. "I'm going to regret this," Lyra muttered. "I'm going to regret this so much." She initiated the cargo bay decontamination sequence, setting up a quarantine section using the emergency containment fields. It wasn't perfect, but it would keep the cub isolated from the main station systems while she figured out what to do. The whole process took 20 minutes, during which the cub maintained its vigil at the door with the patience of someone who had absolutely nothing else scheduled. When the containment field was active and the scanners showed no obvious pathogens or parasites, Lyra opened the outer airlock door. The cub tilted its head, studying the opening. Then, with careful deliberation, it walked inside. Not scrambling, not rushing, just walking in like it had been expected. Like this was exactly what it had planned. Lyra closed the outer door and initiated the atmospheric cycling sequence. Through the interior window, she watched the cub sit down in the middle of the airlock and begin grooming itself, completely unconcerned with its surroundings. It licked one massive paw and dragged it over its face, a gesture so absurdly cat-like that Lyra felt something in her chest crack just a little. "You're going to be trouble," she informed the cub through the intercom. "I can already tell." The cub looked up at the sound of her voice, ears perking forward. It chirped again, then stood and approached the interior door, placing both front paws against it. The atmospheric cycling finished. The interior door unlocked. Lyra opened it remotely, and the cub walked through into the cargo bay containment area like it owned the place. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Woman and alien. Xenobiologist and walking contradiction of established scientific knowledge. Two beings who, according to every regulation and protocol in the book, should not be in the same room together. The cub sat down, wrapped its tail around its paws, and waited. "Right," Lyra said. "So, I'm Lyra. You're, I don't know, something that shouldn't exist. How about I call you Whisper, because you're definitely going to ruin my career quietly," Whisper chirped, which Lyra chose to interpret as agreement. The cub then proceeded to immediately prove its name prescient by spotting a stack of supply containers, launching itself at them with all the grace of a drunk acrobat, and creating a noise that was decidedly not quiet when the entire stack toppled over. "Yep," Lyra said, watching the cub extract itself from the wreckage, completely unbothered. "Definitely going to regret this." Whisper chirped again, found a storage net hanging from the wall, and promptly got tangled in it while trying to investigate. The resulting struggle looked like someone had put a cat in a bag and then thrown the bag into a washing machine. Lyra pulled up her work queue on her tablet, looked at the list of tasks she was supposed to complete, looked at the cub currently hanging upside down in a net while making questioning noises, and made an executive decision. "Screw it," she said, setting the tablet down. "The tissue samples can wait. I've apparently got an impossible alien baby to deal with." She went to help untangle Whisper from the net, and absolutely did not think about how this might be the most interesting thing that had happened to her in 3 months, or how those enormous eyes were tracking her every movement with an intelligence that couldn't be there. Definitely didn't think about that at all. The thing about xenobiology textbooks is that they're great at telling you how alien species digest cellulose or reproduce through spore propagation. But they're absolutely terrible at explaining what to do when said alien species knocks over your entire stock of meal replacement bars and then looks proud about it. Whisper had been aboard the station for 6 hours, and in that time had managed to destroy 3 equipment containers, activate the emergency lighting twice, and get stuck behind the water recycling unit in a space that should not have physically accommodated anything larger than a wrench. The cub was like a furry natural disaster with a learning curve that went straight up. Lyra sat on the cargo bay floor, watching Whisper attempt to manipulate a touchscreen panel. The cub had been studying her for the past 20 minutes while she worked on recalibrating the atmospheric sensors, and now apparently had decided that poking random icons was a fantastic idea. That's the life support menu, Lyra said, gently moving a paw away from the bright red icon. Let's not touch that one. I'm fond of breathing. Whisper chirped and immediately reached for it again. No. Bad? No. Lyra redirected the paw to a harmless diagnostic screen. This one. Touch this one. The cub considered, then deliberately pressed the life support icon. Oh, you're doing that on purpose, Lyra said. You're testing boundaries. Fantastic. I've got a toddler. Except toddlers didn't have 6 legs and weren't supposed to understand interface navigation after watching it exactly once. Lyra pulled up her research files, scrolling through the Grawl behavioral studies. Pack hunters, check. Complex social structures, check. Tool use, specifically listed as absent. Symbolic thinking, absent. Understanding of cause and effect, beyond immediate stimulus response, absent. She looked at Whisper, who had now figured out how to make the screen change colors, and was absolutely delighted about it. You're not supposed to be able to do that, Lyra informed the cub. Whisper changed the screen to purple, chirped triumphantly, then fell over because balancing on hind legs while operating a touchscreen was apparently still beyond current skill level. The cub scrambled upright, undeterred, and went back to the screen. Lyra pulled up the original survey data from Arcturus C6, the comprehensive study that had classified the entire planetary ecosystem. The Grawl section was thorough. Hunting patterns, social organization, communication methods, all the hallmarks of a sophisticated non-sentient species. Smart animals, very smart animals. But animals. Except. She found it buried in the appendix, a note from one of the field researchers. Observed unusual behavior in juvenile specimens, repeated interaction with survey equipment, apparent mimicry of researcher actions. Investigated further, but behavior ceased upon increased observation. Likely explained by juvenile curiosity rather than cognitive sophistication. Likely explained by the weasel words of a scientist who'd seen something weird and couldn't fit it into the boxes. Lyra opened a new file and started taking notes. Whisper was now attempting to organize a scattered pile of tools, moving them one by one to a corner. The pattern was random at first, but then, no, wait. The cub was sorting by size, smallest to largest. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. She grabbed a handful of different colored samples containers and spread them on the floor. Whisper immediately abandoned the tools and approached, sniffing each container in turn. Lyra pointed to the blue one. Blue, she said, tapping it. Whisper watched her finger, then the container, then her face. Processing. Lyra moved to the red container. Red. Then green. Green. She pointed at the blue one again. Blue. Can you find blue? Whisper sat down and stared at her like she'd started speaking nonsense. Which, fair, she basically had. Why would an alien understand English color words? Lyra tried a different approach. She picked up the blue container and placed it away from the others, then pointed at another blue container in the scattered pile. Same. Find same. The cub's ears twitched. It looked at the isolated blue container, then at the pile, then back at Lyra. Then, with movements that seemed almost cautious, Whisper walked to the pile and nosed the other blue container. Yes! Good! Yes! Lyra felt a completely unprofessional surge of excitement. Okay, again. Find same. Over the next hour, Whisper got it right 8 times out of 10. The 2 mistakes were when the cub got distracted by its own tail and when a piece of packaging drifted by and triggered the hunting instinct. Lyra sat back, her mind racing. Pattern recognition, matching, basic problem-solving. These were cognitive skills that put Grawl somewhere in the range of, what, Primates? Corvids? This wasn't just smart animal behavior. This was proto-sentience at minimum. And nobody knew. Or, correction, somebody had known and decided it wasn't worth investigating. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message, and Lyra's stomach dropped when she saw the header. Titan Biocorps. The company that funded her research, paid for this station, and owned the rights to basically everything in this system. Outpost Meridian, this is Titan Survey Command. Confirming arrival of assessment team. Local time 14 days from this transmission. Team will conduct comprehensive resource evaluation of Arcturus 6. Prepare all research data for review. Commander Cyrus will be leading the operation. Acknowledge receipt. Lyra's mouth went dry. 14 days. A corporate assessment team. That meant they were looking at mining operations, colony establishment, resource extraction. All the things that happened when a planet got classified as uninhabited by sentient species. She looked at Whisper, who was now attempting to build a tower out of the sample containers and failing spectacularly. If Titan found out about this, if they discovered there was even a possibility of sentience, they'd either bury it or, worse, they'd exploit it. Titan Biocorps wasn't known for its ethical boundaries. They were known for their profit margins and their very talented legal team. Okay, Lyra said aloud, making Whisper look up from the container disaster. Okay, we have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prove you're not just a smart animal. 2 weeks to document everything. And we have to do it without the automated systems flagging anything unusual, because those logs go straight to Titan. Whisper chirped and knocked over the container tower. Right. This is going well already. She spent the rest of the day setting up proper documentation equipment in the cargo bay, all running on isolated systems that wouldn't sync with the main station logs. Whisper helped by eating a cable, getting stuck in a toolbox, and discovering that zero-gravity maneuvering in the connecting corridors was the best thing that had ever happened to anyone ever. By the time Lyra collapsed into her bunk that night, she'd compiled 6 hours of footage, showing Whisper solving puzzles, mimicking actions, and demonstrating object permanence. The Cub had also learned to open the cargo bay door, which meant Lyra had to install an override lock, which Whisper then spent 30 minutes studying with intense focus. 2 weeks. Lyra muttered into her pillow. I've got 2 weeks to prove alien sentience while hiding said alien from corporate surveillance systems. And my main research subject has the attention span of a caffeinated squirrel. From the cargo bay, she heard a crash, followed by an innocent-sounding chirp. We're both going to get fired, she told the ceiling. Or arrested. Possibly both. The ceiling, like the coffee maker, maintained diplomatic silence. Day 8 of Operation Don't Let the Evil Corporation Find Out began with Whisper learning to use the food dispenser and ended with Lyra discovering that everything she thought she knew about her job was a lie. The middle part involved a lot of cleaning up spilled nutrient paste, but that was becoming standard. No, you push the green button first, Lyra explained for the 5th time. Green, then yellow. Not yellow, then green. That dispenses cleaning solvent, which I promise you don't want to eat. Whisper, who had already tried to eat the cleaning solvent yesterday and spent an hour making faces about it, carefully pressed the green button. The dispenser whirred and produced a packet of protein paste. The Cub grabbed it with both front paws, chirped triumphantly, and promptly squeezed too hard, sending paste exploding across the cargo bay wall. Perfect. Great. Love that for us. Lyra grabbed a cleaning cloth while Whisper licked paste off the floor with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't just created a biohazard. You know what? This is fine. This is character building. I'm becoming a more patient person. The cub looked up at her with paste on its nose and chirped. Don't give me that look. You know what you did. While Whisper continued excavating the paste situation, Lyra returned to her workstation. She'd been reviewing the old survey data for days now, and the more she read, the more things didn't add up. The initial team had spent 6 months on Arcturus 6, conducting comprehensive ecosystem mapping. Their Grawl observations were detailed, thorough, and completely lacking in any mention of the behaviors she was documenting. Except for those appendix notes. Those weird little footnotes about unusual juvenile behavior that was never fully investigated. She pulled up the researcher credentials. The team lead had been Dr. Amara Gould, xenobiologist with 2 decades of field experience. Her publication history was impressive. Sentient species contact protocols, intelligence assessment frameworks, ethical guidelines for corporate interaction with developing civilizations. Heavy topics for someone doing basic fauna surveys. And then, nothing. After the Arcturus 6 survey, Gould's publication record went silent. She was still listed as employed by Titan Biocore, but her research output had dropped to quarterly resource reports. It was like watching someone go from concert pianist to playing background music in a shopping center. Lyra chewed her lip, thinking. She pulled up the personnel directory, found Gould's contact information, and stared at it for a long moment. This was stupid. This was potentially career-ending stupid. But then again, so was hiding an alien cub in her cargo bay, and she was already committed to that particular brand of stupid. She composed a message, deleted it, composed another one, deleted that too. Finally, she just wrote, Dr. Gould, I'm the researcher currently stationed at Outpost Meridian. I'm reviewing your Arcturus 6 survey data and had some questions about the Grawl behavioral observations in Appendix C. Would you have time to discuss? Professional, innocent, definitely not implying anything suspicious. She sent it before she could talk herself out of it. Whisper had finished cleaning the paste situation by the dubious method of eating all the evidence and was now attempting to climb into a storage locker. The cub's problem-solving had gotten disturbingly sophisticated over the past week. Yesterday, Whisper had figured out how to stack containers to reach a high shelf. This morning, the cub had opened a locked cabinet by watching where Lyra kept the key and retrieving it. The terminal chimed with an incoming call request. Video. From Gould. That was fast. Suspiciously fast for someone who should be in a completely different sector. Lyra accepted the call. The screen flickered to show a woman in her 50s with dark skin, gray-streaked hair pulled into a practical bun, and eyes that looked simultaneously exhausted and calculating. You're seeing it too, Gould said, without preamble. No greeting, no small talk. Just statement of fact. Lyra's heart rate kicked up. Seeing what? Don't play careful with me. I've got maybe 3 minutes before the automated monitoring system flags this call as suspicious. The Grawl. You're observing cognitive behaviors that don't match the official classification. There was no point in denying it. A juvenile specimen made contact with the station. The intelligence level is, it's not matching any of the survey data. Gould's expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. How advanced? Tool use, pattern recognition, mimicry of complex actions, basic problem solving. I don't have enough data for a full assessment, but it's significant. It's proto-sentience at minimum, Gould said. Possibly full sentience with cultural knowledge transmission. I documented the same behaviors 6 years ago. Titan buried my reports. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Lyra felt her stomach twist. Why? Because sentient species have rights, protections. You can't strip mine a planet if it's home to thinking beings. Bad for publicity. Worse for profit margins. Gould leaned closer to her camera. They're sending Cyrus, aren't they? For the assessment? Arrives in 6 days. Then you've got 6 days to compile ironclad proof, and even that might not be enough. Cyrus is. He's very good at making inconvenient evidence disappear. Behind Lyra, something crashed. She glanced back to see Whisper had successfully gotten into the storage locker and was now wearing a maintenance helmet that was approximately 3 times too large. The cub chirped proudly from inside the helmet, the sound echoing metallically. When she looked back at the screen, Gould was almost smiling. Almost. Is that a Grawl cub wearing safety equipment? Yes, this is my life now. They're incredible when they're young, curious about everything. The adults are more reserved, but the juveniles, they want to learn. Gould's expression hardened, which is why Titan classified them as non-sentient. Easier that way. You have proof? Documentation? 6 years' worth. Video files, behavioral analyses, linguistic pattern studies, all officially classified as corrupted data or researcher bias. I've been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment. She paused. This might be that moment. But we need more than just my old data. We need current observations, independent verification. We need to make this impossible to ignore. Lyra's mind raced. The assessment meeting. Cyrus will present his findings for the resource extraction approval. If we present counter-evidence then, in an official capacity, with time-stamped data, it goes into the public record automatically. Can't be buried. Gould nodded. But you'll need to keep your observations hidden until then. The moment the automated systems flag unusual activity with the Grawl, Titan will know. I've been running everything on isolated systems. No network connection to the main logs. Good. Keep it that way. I'll send you my files through a secure channel. And, this is important, Cyrus is already suspicious by nature. Don't give him anything to work with. Act normal. Play the bored researcher counting days until her rotation ends. That's not exactly acting at this point. Perfect. Lean into it. Gould glanced at something off-screen. I have to go. The monitoring AI is getting curious. One more thing. Don't trust anyone on the assessment team except me. Cyrus brings loyalists. People who ask the right questions and ignore the wrong answers. The call disconnected. Lyra sat in silence, processing. 6 years. Gould had known for 6 years and hadn't been able to do anything about it. How many other researchers had seen things and been silenced? How many opportunities had been missed? Whisper emerged from the storage locker, still wearing the helmet, and walked directly into a wall. The impact made a resonant bonging sound. The cub backed up, shook its head, and tried again, with identical results. Okay, Admiral safety violation. Let's get that off you. Lyra removed the helmet. Whisper immediately tried to put it back on. The next 5 days became a blur of covert documentation and theatrical boredom. Lyra ran Whisper through every cognitive test she could devise, recording everything on isolated drives. The cub learned to match shapes, sequence patterns, and even demonstrated basic counting up to 5. When presented with a simple puzzle box, Whisper studied it for 10 minutes, then systematically tested different approaches until finding the solution. The files from Gould arrived in encrypted chunks. Her documentation was meticulous. Video of adult Grawl using tools, recordings of what appeared to be linguistic communication, observations of cultural behaviors like food sharing and cooperative problem-solving. It was a treasure trove of evidence that any ethical scientist would have published immediately. And Titan had locked it away. On day 12, the automated systems alerted her to an incoming vessel, the assessment team arriving early. Of course, they were arriving early. Why give her the full 2 weeks when they could throw her off balance instead? Lyra scrambled to hide the last of her isolated equipment, transferring files to encrypted storage and wiping any trace of her work from the networked systems. Whisper, sensing her stress, stayed close and unusually quiet. The cub had learned to recognize her moods with unsettling accuracy. "Okay, listen," Lyra said, kneeling down to Whisper's level. "Bad people are coming. Well, probably bad. Definitely morally questionable. You need to stay in the cargo bay, stay quiet, and for the love of everything, please don't knock anything over." Whisper tilted its head, ears forward, listening, understanding. "I mean it. This is important. These people, they could hurt your whole family if they find out what you can do." She felt ridiculous explaining this to an alien cub, but the way Whisper watched her, focused and attentive, made her think maybe it wasn't so ridiculous. "Just trust me, okay?" The cub reached out one paw and placed it on her hand. Gentle, deliberate. Lyra's throat tightened. "Yeah, okay, we've got this." The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thunk that reverberated through the station. Lyra pulled up the airlock camera and watched 3 figures in Titan corporate environment suits cycle through. The lead figure moved with the casual confidence of someone who owned everything around them and knew it. That would be Cyrus. She activated the intercom. "Welcome to Outpost Meridian. Cycling inner door in 30 seconds. "Appreciated," a smooth male voice responded. "Looking forward to the tour." Lyra took a breath, pulled on her best expression of mild boredom mixed with professional courtesy, and went to greet the people who wanted to destroy an entire species for profit. Behind her, in the cargo bay, Whisper settled into a hiding spot behind some equipment crates. The cub's enormous eyes tracked Lyra as she left, and for a moment she could have sworn the expression on that alien face was worry. "Just a few more days," she whispered, though Whisper couldn't possibly hear her. "Then we blow this whole thing wide open." The inner airlock door opened, and Cyrus stepped through, already smiling like they were old friends. Lyra smiled back and prepared to lie her ass off. Cyrus was the kind of handsome that came from expensive genetic optimization and a smile that had been focus group tested for maximum trustworthiness. He had the dead eyes of a corporate predator and the handshake of someone who'd taken seminars on building rapport. "Lyra, pleasure to meet you in person. I've been reviewing your reports. Thorough work." He gestured to the 2 people behind him. "This is Dr. Amara Gould, our senior xenobiologist, and Paxton, my security liaison." Paxton was built like a walking wall and said nothing, which somehow felt more threatening than if he'd been overtly hostile. Gould met Lyra's eyes briefly, her expression carefully neutral, before turning to examine the station interior with apparent professional interest. "The station's compact but functional," Lyra said, slipping into tour guide mode. "Main lab is through here, living quarters are minimal, and cargo bay serves as secondary research space. And you've been here alone for, what, 3 months?" Cyrus walked through the lab, picking up random equipment and setting it down like he was shopping. "That takes dedication. Or maybe you just really love silence." "The work is engaging enough. Tissue analysis isn't glamorous, but it's necessary for comprehensive ecosystem mapping." Right. The ecosystem." Cyrus pulled up a holographic display from his wrist unit. "Which brings us to the purpose of our visit. Titan is considering Arcturus VI for expanded operations. Colony establishment, resource extraction, the usual. We need to finalize the sentience assessment before proceeding. The survey was comprehensive, Lyra said carefully. Gould are the dominant species. Intelligence comparable to pack predators. No evidence of symbolic thinking or cultural development. She could feel Gould's eyes on her, watching how well she played the part. Exactly what I like to hear. Simple, clean, by-the-book assessment. Cyrus smiled wider. Paxton, start the environmental scans. I want mineral composition maps by tonight. Dr. Gould, you're with me. Let's review the biological data. The next 3 days were a masterclass in acting disinterested while internally screaming. Cyrus and Paxton spent their time analyzing the planet's resource potential, marking locations for mining operations that would devastate huge swaths of jungle. Gould worked quietly, reviewing Lyra's official research files while occasionally shooting her meaningful looks that said, "Trust the plan." The problem was that Whisper was getting restless. The Cub had been confined to the cargo bay for 3 days, with Lyra only able to visit during designated rest periods when she could claim to be doing inventory checks. On day 3, she found Whisper attempting to rewire a control panel using tools the Cub had apparently organized by function. How did you even— No, you know what? I don't want to know. Lyra gently took the tools away. One more day, just one more day, and then this is all over. Whisper chirped softly, clearly unhappy about the confinement. The Cub had been remarkably patient, but patience had limits. I know this is hard, but your family, everyone like you, they need us to do this right. She scratched behind Whisper's ears, which had become their routine. Tomorrow, big meeting. Cyrus presents his findings, and then we present ours. The Cub leaned into the scratching, eyes half closed, trusting. That night, Gould sent her a coded message. Conference module, 0900 hours. Cyrus presents first. Be ready. Lyra spent the hours until morning reviewing every piece of documentation, every video file, every scrap of evidence. It had to be perfect. It had to be undeniable. At 0850, she made her way to the conference module. Cyrus was already there, loading his presentation. Paxton stood by the door, arms crossed. Gould arrived exactly on time, carrying a data pad and wearing the expression of someone who'd attended too many boring meetings. All right, Cyrus began, pulling up a 3-dimensional map of Arcturus 6. Let's make this efficient. The planet offers significant mineral deposits, viable colony zones, and minimal complications. The dominant fauna, while impressive, pose no legal barriers to development. He walked through the data with practiced ease. Resource projections, development timelines, profit analyses. Everything reduced to numbers and potential revenue streams. When he reached the Gould section, he spent approximately 90 seconds confirming their non-sentient status before moving on. Any questions before I submit the approval recommendation? Actually, yes. Lyra stood, her heart hammering. I have concerns about the Gould intelligence assessment. Cyrus's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Concerns? Your own reports support the existing classification. My official reports, yes, but I've been conducting additional observations that suggest significant cognitive capabilities that weren't previously documented. Additional observations. His tone was pleasant. His expression was not. Using station resources for unauthorized research. Using isolated systems to avoid data corruption. Lyra pulled up her files, projecting them alongside his presentation. I'd like to present evidence of proto-sentient behavior in juvenile Gould specimens. The room went very quiet. This is highly irregular, Cyrus said. We're here to finalize established findings, not entertain speculative research. Then, let's call it peer review. Gould activated her own files. Because I have 6 years of similar documentation that was deemed corrupted data. Funny how it lines up perfectly with current observations. Cyrus looked at Gould like she'd just pulled a weapon. Dr. Gould, this isn't appropriate. What's not appropriate is suppressing evidence of sentience to expedite resource extraction. Gould's voice was steel. But let's let the data speak for itself. Lyra started the first video, Whisper solving the puzzle box. Then, the pattern-matching tests, the tool use, the mimicry. Each clip was time-stamped and verified. Gould added her historical data, showing adult Grawl behaviors that paralleled everything Lyra had documented. "This proves nothing," Cyrus said, but his casual confidence was cracking. "Trained behaviors. Researcher bias. Any decent legal team would shred this in hours." "Then let's add one more piece of evidence." Lyra opened the cargo bay door remotely. Real-time demonstration. She'd briefed Whisper that morning, as much as you could brief an alien cub. She'd explained what needed to happen, knowing full well that the odds of a 4-month-old successfully pulling off complex behaviors on command were essentially 0. Whisper walked into the conference module with perfect timing. The cub moved calmly, without the usual chaos, heading straight for the presentation screen. Cyrus took a step back. Paxton's hand moved toward whatever weapon he carried. Gould held very still. Whisper sat down in front of the interface, looked at Lyra, then at the screen. The cub reached up with one paw and touched the control panel. The screen changed, cycling through saved files. Images appeared. The station exterior. Lyra working in the lab. The planet below. Other Grawl in their jungle habitat. Then Whisper did something Lyra hadn't even thought possible. The cub arranged the images in sequence. Planet, Grawl pack, jungle, then the station. A story. A narrative of origin and journey. The room was absolutely silent. Whisper touched the communication board Lyra had built for pattern exercises. It was crude, just basic symbols for simple concepts. The cub tapped deliberately. Circle for home, triangle for family, star for help. 3 symbols, 3 concepts, 1 message. "Clever trick," Cyrus said, but his voice was thin. "Trained responses to what? Symbols the cub learned 4 days ago," Lyra challenged. "That's language acquisition. That's symbolic thinking. That's sentience." "I'm transmitting all documentation to the Interstellar Conservation Council," Gould said, her fingers moving across her data pad. "Complete files, historical and current, time-stamped and verified. As of right now, it's in their database." Cyrus's professional mask finally cracked. "You can't. That's proprietary research. You've both just violated your employment contracts. And you've violated about 6 different interstellar protection laws," Gould countered. "So let's see whose lawyers are better." Paxton moved toward Gould, but stopped when external alarms started blaring. The station's proximity sensors had activated. Lyra pulled up the external cameras and felt her breath catch. There were Grawl outside the station. Adults, 6 of them, standing on the docking platform. Not attacking, not threatening, just waiting. Their postures were calm, deliberate. They'd approached the same way Whisper had, understanding exactly where to go. "They knew," Lyra whispered. "They knew where Whisper was the entire time." Whisper chirped, a complex series of sounds that the adults outside responded to. Through the cameras, Lyra watched one of the adults, larger than the others, touch the airlock door. Not scratching randomly. A pattern. A knock. This wasn't a lost cub, Gould said, wonder in her voice. This was first contact. They sent their most curious, least threatening member to make the approach. Because they've been watching humans, Lyra added, learning how we communicate, how we signal peaceful intent. Whisper wasn't learning to knock by accident. The cub was taught. The implications crashed over the room like a wave. Cyrus stared at the screens, at the adult Growl waiting patiently outside, at Whisper sitting calmly in the middle of the conference module. His career was over. He had to know his career was over. I need to contact Titan Legal. He reached for his communication unit. I'd save your energy, Gould said. Conservation Council vessels are already en route. Should arrive within the week. Until then, this station is under protection protocols. You planned this, both of you. We documented facts, Lyra corrected. You made the choice to ignore them. Whisper chirped again, louder this time. The cub moved to the observation window, placing one paw against the reinforced glass. Outside, the large adult Growl mirrored the gesture. Parent and child, separated by transparent aluminum and the weight of human decisions. Open a communication channel, Lyra said. Wide broadcast, all frequencies. That's not, Cyrus started. Do it, or I will. Gould's finger was already moving toward the controls. Lyra activated the channel herself. She had no idea if the Growl could understand, if they'd been monitoring human transmissions long enough to parse meaning from the sounds. But they'd sent Whisper to learn. They'd sent their child into the unknown because they'd observed humans and decided to try communication. The least she could do was try back. This is Research Station Outpost Meridian, she said, her voice steady despite everything. We understand you've been waiting. Your family member is safe, unharmed. We'd like to talk, if you're willing. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, through the external microphones, came a sound. Complex, layered, nothing like the simple chirps Whisper made. It was language, sophisticated, structured language. The translation algorithms choked on it, producing gibberish. But the intent was clear even without words. The Growl had heard. The Growl were responding. First contact. Actual, genuine, first contact. And humanity had almost strip-mined their world without ever knowing. Lyra looked down at Whisper, who was now bouncing excitedly on all six paws, clearly recognizing the voice of the adult outside. The cub chirped back, and the adult responded, and suddenly there was a conversation happening, mediated through station walls and the vast gulf between species. This changes everything, Gould said quietly. Yeah, Lyra agreed. Everything. Cyrus sank into a chair, his perfect corporate composure completely shattered. Paxton stood uncertainly by the door, apparently waiting for orders that weren't coming. And in the middle of it all, a small alien cub who'd learned to knock on doors and change the trajectory of two civilizations. 3 days later, the Conservation Council arrived with proper xenolinguists and contact specialists. Titan Biocore withdrew all claims to Arcturus VI under a mountain of legal pressure and very bad publicity. Cyrus disappeared into a maze of corporate restructuring. Gould accepted a position heading the new Growl Human Relations Council, and Lyra became the official liaison, working with a team of researchers to establish genuine communication. Whisper returned to the planet but visited regularly, now accompanied by siblings who were equally curious and equally destructive. The cub was still terrible at knocking, still destroyed equipment with alarming frequency, but now did it with the full support of the scientific community. 6 months after that scratching at the door, Lyra stood in a newly built embassy on Arcturus VI, watching Grawl cubs and human children attempt to teach each other games with mixed success. The translation technology had improved dramatically. The Grawl had shared their history, their culture, their relief that humans had finally stopped being oblivious and started listening. Whisper bounded over, now twice as large and still prone to knocking things over. The young Grawl chirped something that the translator rendered as, "New humans arriving. I greet?" "Sure," Lyra said, smiling. "Just remember, gentle knocking, not the enthusiastic kind." Whisper chirped agreement and headed toward the landing pad with the careful enthusiasm of someone who'd learned that first impressions mattered. Lyra watched the young Grawl go, thinking about scratching sounds and locked doors, and how close they'd come to never opening them at all. Behind her, another researcher called out about sensor anomalies near the southern continent, a different species, showing signs of tool use. Another mystery, another potential connection. "Here we go. Again," Lyra said to no one in particular, and went to investigate, because now they knew to listen for the knocking, and they knew to answer when someone, anyone, was trying to say hello.